the task of, hey, I'm really excited about Path A. I want you to identify 3 reasons why it might not work. Like you've just created psychological safety for them to disagree with the path that you're recommending.
Wow.
And because that's what you're asking. You're not saying, do you like it? Do you not like it? You're saying, give me 3 reasons why it might not work. And probably you're either going to save yourself from a bad decision, or you're probably going to actually find ways that you can make that path even stronger because of what they just identified.
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another knowledge bomb episode of Lead to Greatness, where we believe in helping others reach their greatest potential and together change the world. Today on Lead to Greatness, we have Dr. Lori Gallaher.
And if this is your first time, don't forget to subscribe. Hit that like button, hit the notification bell so you won't miss any of these amazing episodes. And if you're on iTunes, go ahead and rate the podcast and leave a review. That helps get the word out to great leaders and entrepreneurs like yourself.
Please help me welcome Dr. Lori with Building a Thriving Company Culture.
This is Cedric Francis, and you're listening to Lead to Greatness.
My name is Dr. Lori Gallaher. I am a psychologist, and specifically I focus on organizational psychology, or at least that's my background.
Okay.
I fell in love with psychology from my very first, Psych 101 kind of class that I took in college, and was really excited to find out that I can study almost anything in the realm of psychology. If I go into organizational psych, I just have to say at work at the end of whatever I want to study. So I had the chance to come out here to Central Florida for my PhD.
Wow.
And that's actually where I got the chance to go work for NASA.
Wow.
So do you remember, Cedric, when the Space Shuttle Columbia accident happened in 2003?
Yes.
Yeah, well, so they actually hired me after the accident.
Okay.
So, a lot of people think about the Challenger accident from the 80s. That's kind of emblazoned in people's minds because so many people were watching that space shuttle launch. The teacher was on board, but Columbia happened way later. This was in 2003, and NASA lost the astronauts actually on reentry. And so they did an investigation, of course, to figure out what happened. And so technically they knew that there was a piece of foam that hit the orbiter during the launch, and that destroyed the heat shield. And that's why the astronauts didn't make it safely back. But the investigation said NASA's culture, the culture was to blame, even though it had just been rated the #1 place to work in the federal government.
Oh.
So you've got like the smartest people in the world, little rocket scientists, you've got Nobel Prize winners, you've got the most dedicated workforce. They're highly engaged. They love working for NASA. They dedicate tens of thousands of hours, or they donate it back to the government every year, because they're so committed to the mission. But yet culture was blamed. And so it raised really important questions about what is culture. And a lot of organizational psychology helps leaders understand, like, what is culture? What are the invisible forces that are affecting human behavior? So I got my career started actually working for NASA to help transform culture after that Columbia accident.
Culture means a lot for different people, but I want you to give us your definition of what culture is to you.
Do you want my geeky definition? Or
Let me get both.
Okay. All right. Here's the very geeky definition of culture. Culture is an emergent property of organizations that's created by the interaction of the common beliefs and behaviors of the employees. So I'll break that down really quick. So emergence. Cedric, I imagine that you know what sugar tastes like, yes?
Absolutely.
Right? It's in a lot of our food, unfortunately, in this country. So we know what the taste of sugar is. Sugar is actually comprised of hydrogen, oxygen, and carbon, and they interact in a way that produces the taste of sugar. So the taste is an emergent property. And just to drive this home, I can't ask you to taste carbon, taste hydrogen, taste oxygen, add it up in your head, and then tell me what sugar is going to taste like. Right? That's not how it works. In fact, you take those same ingredients and you put them together differently, different interactions, and you get a totally different emergent taste.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
Okay. So that's emergence. And so this is part of why culture can feel, sometimes people call it fluffy, but it's just because they don't understand that
Yeah.
it's very real. Culture is very real, but it emerges based on all of these forces and factors and how they interact.
Yeah.
So that's the emergent part of the definition. And then the second part of the definition is saying that it's based on the interactions of the common behaviors and beliefs of the people.
Hmm.
So that means that the true source of culture is between the ears of the employees.
Mm. Mm.
It lives in the heads and hearts of the humans.
Yeah.
And so culture is this emergent property. You can't work on it directly. It's kind of like a smokestack. You can't grab it directly, but it can be influenced by all these variables. But then it also resides inside each person because that is the source of the beliefs that drive their behavior. And so that's our super geeky definition of culture, but it takes this complex problem of how do you truly design a culture that helps you execute strategy and starts to make it feel a little bit more tangible. It means that if we can get clear about the beliefs that people hold in an organization, we can better influence their behavior. And we understand that we want to look at things holistically and not try to do just additive things because it's never that simple.
Wow. Wow. This is good. And you talked about when they did the investigation that they seen it was the culture. How did they come up with that conclusion?
So they were highlighting the fact that there was an opportunity. There were actually multiple opportunities that NASA had to potentially do something about the damage from this foam strike. So the foam struck the orbiter like well over a minute into the launch, which means that there were, 130 cameras pointed at the shuttle, but none of them could see exactly where the foam hit. And there were 3 different teams across the agency that were aware of this foam strike, is what they called it. And foam strikes, unfortunately, they had been happening for years. Like a lot of people don't know that about the space shuttle program because every other foam strike didn't pose a safety risk to the astronauts. But every other foam strike actually hit the underbelly of the orbiter with those like really thick tiles. This one happened to hit on the leading edge of the wing, but they didn't know that. They didn't know where it hit. And so they said that culture was to blame because there were people who were aware that this could be a problem, but they were going through unofficial communication channels to raise it, partly because a higher governing body said, we don't worry about foam strikes during the flight. They said this is not an in-flight issue. So you're already talking about trying to push against the system, trying to push against a previous decision that's been made. And so that's part of why people were kind of using other channels. But because they weren't following the proper processes, the request was to get imagery. They wanted to reposition some satellites, just not a small ask, by the way. It's very expensive, would have required interagency collaboration. And they just wanted to get a picture of Columbia to see, is she damaged? These requests got shut down at every turn because they weren't following the proper process. And so nobody could point to a specific requirement for it to happen. And so when the investigation learned that this was going on, they could see, well, there's a culture problem here. And a big part of what was missing was psychological safety. So psychological safety was coined by Dr. Amy Edmondson back in 1999. And it really speaks to the kind of like the vibe, like how does the team or the culture feel? Specifically, are people on this team willing to express any level of vulnerability? For example, it can be vulnerable to say, I made a mistake. It can be vulnerable to say, I disagree with you, boss. It can be vulnerable to say, I don't think I fully understand what we're talking about here or what direction we're trying to go. All of these things are really small moments of vulnerability that are critical to a team having really good, effective communication. And so when psychological safety isn't high enough, people withhold their thoughts. They're afraid to speak up. They're afraid to challenge. They're afraid to raise dissenting opinions. If you've ever had that sense of like, I don't want to say anything in the meeting, like that's bad for my career. That shows you that you don't have enough psychological safety for people to speak up even when it matters.
Why did it happen? And how did the organization begin to, I guess, creating a safer environment for the employees?
Yeah. Well, this is where it gets all into my world that I love, all the psychology stuff.
Yeah.
Because pragmatically, Cedric, you know that most leaders, the vast majority of leaders, do not wake up and think, you know what I'm going to do today? I'm going to try to create a feeling of no safety for my employees. I want them to, shut down and don't ever disagree with me. Like almost no leader. I won't say no leader. Very few leaders are negatively impacting psychological safety on purpose.
Yeah.
And so a lot of what we were doing when we were there at NASA was helping the leaders to grow their self-awareness.
Okay.
So they could better understand how some of their behavioral tendencies were sending signals to the team that might have actually been contrary. In fact, Cedric, I'd love to share kind of a difficult moment in my past related to this. So I had been working with NASA for maybe like 2 or 3 years. I'm not quite sure. And I had moved up into a position of leadership myself. Mm-hmm. And I took one of those 360-degree assessments. I actually took several of them in my time at NASA. And this one just stuck with me, though. I remember sitting in the cafeteria during this leadership training, and I was going over my results. It was like 30 pages. And I turned to this page and it asked my respondents, which was everything from my internal customers to my leaders, to my peers, to people on my team, about my tendency to use some like negative influence tactics. And I'd gotten really good feedback. But then on this page, there were at least a couple people on my team who indicated that they felt that I would sometimes bully them intellectually.
Wow.
Oh, like gut punch, total gut punch moment for me, because here I am, like brought in to help create psychological safety, like help the leaders learn to do that. But I wasn't doing it as well as I needed to for my own team. And so it was just this moment of realizing like, it's not enough just to know. You can't just know that psychological safety matters. It requires a deep level of introspection. It required me to be able to better understand some of my own behaviors and how was I unintentionally creating some of that vibe with the team such that they didn't necessarily want to speak up with me. Wow. So it's really growing self-awareness and self-acceptance is the key for leaders to create that kind of psychological safety.
Wow. So what are some of the things that leaders can start focusing on right now to be able to create this awareness?
So the first thing I'm going to recommend might feel a little bit strange, or maybe not, Cedric. I would invite the leaders to start to pay attention to their physiology. Pay attention to what's going on in your body. So when we're struggling to create psychological safety, it's almost always because we have our own defense mechanisms that are popping up. And this is happening subconsciously. Like people will think it's just part of their personality, but it's actually these baked in defense mechanisms. And so there's almost always, or maybe always, some kind of physiological response that's happening in your body when your defenses get triggered. It's the first sign. And I was clueless about this in the beginning. I had coaches tell me to like, well, what do you feel in your body? And I was like, do you mean, what am I thinking? And they're like, no, like drop down. Like, what does it feel like? And I was like in my face. Like I was just so confused because I had turned the volume down, on that mind body connection. And I wasn't tuned into some of those physiological expressions. So that would be one of the first things I would say is like leaders can just, even right now as you're listening, just do a quick scan, just kind of check in with your body and see what you notice. You just kind of like start from jaw, move down, think about your throat, your neck, shoulders, chest, gut, and just sort of see like, are you holding tension? Is there pain? Is there discomfort? Just tune into it. And the more you do this, the more you're going to start to recognize when something does start to flare up. And that's your moment to pause. Because then you can get yourself back into alignment and not move down this path where you're unintentionally sending signals that you don't mean to send. Does that feel weird?
Yes.
As a piece of advice.
Wow. And so what do you do like once let's say you do start feeling, certain tension and certain things, what do you do with it?
So this is where it comes back to the story in your head. You ever use that phrase? Like, what's the story in my head?
No.
This blew my mind when I learned this. So you're never reacting to the world around you, ever. Seems like you are, feels like you are, but you're never actually responding to the world around you. You are responding to the story that you're telling yourself about what's happening.
Ah, yes.
And like if have you ever been in a conversation with, at least two other people, and then maybe one person leaves, they end the conversation, and the person that you're there with is all indignant or upset. Can you believe he said that? And you're going, what? Like they're all worked up about something and you're not worked up about it,
Uh,
but you were in the same conversation.
uh,
So there's a different meaning or different story that you're putting on what's happening. And so as soon as there's some kind of like a physiological, like, oof, something's coming up for me, I want to check in with myself. What's the story that I'm making up about what's
mm,
happening here?
mm.
So it's a
This,
lot of like self-awareness. It's like introspect like crazy.
this is good. This is good. And it's really, I love the awareness part. I mean, it's really resonate to, so lead to greatness. So yesterday, prior to the interview on today, I actually did a survey. And
Mm-hmm.
on the survey, I was actually looking over here trying to find the question. It was really, really interesting question, but the question was about someone that's, golly, I wish I can, oh man, I was looking for it. Lead to greatness. So on the question, you have usually true, that's a 5, and then 1 is rarely true. And I mean, I was really contemplating between a 3 and a 2. And to be honest, it kept me, kind of kept me up last night because I was
Mm-hmm.
thinking about it. So,
Mm-hmm.
so that aspect of, I mean, me really being honest with
Mm-hmm.
myself, say, no, I'm not always happy for the individual. I mean, what is that? What's going on with me?
Yeah. So thank you so much for bringing this up. And I love that you're willing to share some of that
Absolutely.
vulnerability
Absolutely.
because you are not alone.
Yeah.
You're not alone. Like there's a reason that is one of the items that's on this self-acceptance quiz. And then if any of your listeners would like to take it themselves, it's just selfacceptancequiz.com. It's really easy.
It's
So what we're looking at here, so self-acceptance, I've mentioned this briefly. This is key to creating psychological safety.
mm,
And there's a lot in there, but let me tie it back to what I was just saying about like, what is the story I'm telling myself?
mhm,
So when you are comparing yourself to somebody else or somebody has accomplished maybe more than what you have, and maybe you feel a little envious, right? Or like jealous or like that kind of emotion comes up.
yeah.
Yeah. So this is where you want to check in. What is the story I am telling myself
mm,
about what this means? This person has accomplished X. I have not yet accomplished X. What is the story in my head about it?
Yeah.
So what comes up for you?
For me, I guess it makes me feel like I'm not enough. It really, for me, it puts me in a position to show me where I want to be. I'm currently not there. So it's just a reminder.
Yes.
It's a reminder to
Yes.
me on what I'm trying to accomplish and haven't accomplished.
And that can feel painful. That can
Yeah.
feel hard, right?
Yeah.
So that's the story. And thank you so much for your honest answer there. I think that's exactly what I see with the high achieving clients that I work with. And I have been there and I am still there sometimes. So
Mm,
I do not purport to be like a fully self-accepted human being. I'm
yeah.
very much on a journey. Cedric, I literally have journey tattooed on my wrist as a reminder to myself that
I
this is a
love it.
constant
I
journey.
love it. I love it.
So again, the feeling that comes up for you, the like maybe noticing, maybe I'm not so happy for this person,
Mm,
isn't based on their accomplishments. It's this deeper story you're telling yourself of like, feels like I'm not enough.
mm,
There's this gap between where I am and where I want to be.
yeah.
But this is where it gets fun to me. Because do you think, Cedric, that you were ever going to achieve a level of success where you no longer have any goals or desire to grow and improve?
No.
Right?
No.
Like,
Never.
I don't think that you and your listeners are ever going to wake up one day and be like, you know what? I think I'm done.
Yeah.
Like, it's why you have this show. It's why your listeners
Absolutely.
listen. Everybody listening to this show, y'all are
Absolutely.
never going to hit a point in time where there's not one more milestone you're excited to achieve. You're going to keep pushing that bar up.
Yeah.
And that's amazing, right?
Yeah.
Lead with greatness.
Yeah.
You want to keep moving that bar up. So here is the trick. This is what self-acceptance does for you. the gap between where you are and where you want to be.
Mm.
The gap exists, but it will probably always exist because as soon as you hit whatever milestone or goal that is, you're just bumping that bar up, right?
Oh.
But you get to choose, what is the story I tell myself about what this gap means?
Come on, yes.
So if I'm choosing the story that this is evidence that I am not enough, oof, that is that self-judgment. It's that self-criticism, right? That inner critic. And that is a tougher way to walk through life. But I could just as easily look at this gap between where I am and where I want to be and look at this as simply the direction I'm excited to go. I can choose to feel like I'm enough right here, exactly where I am, but I'm still super pumped about getting up here.
Yes.
And so it is a choice and it's a practice. Like there's a lot that goes into this concept of self-acceptance, but the key thing that you're calling out here for yourself is you have the desire to self-improve, and you can do self-improvement from the lens of self-judgment, which is like, oh, I'm not enough. I've got to get better. But you're always going to be in that hamster wheel.
Yeah.
Or you can recognize, wait a second, I can focus on improving myself from a self-accepting lens. I can choose to feel enough right now and still feel a drive and a motivation to grow and improve, for the love that I have, for the passion, for the way that I know that I can have an impact on the world. The feeling of not enough is not the only driver to help you motivate yourself. And research is actually pretty clear. You're going to improve more and improve faster when you're focused on self-improvement from a self-accepting lens rather than a self-judging lens.
That's knowledge. Knowledge bomb. Knowledge bomb. This is amazing. And I'm thinking, because even for me, I mean, I'm like I said, I was up. And so it was something I wasn't even aware of. But now it's been identified. So now I have something to work on. And now you are just giving me some tips to work on. Thank you. Thank you. Personally, thank you.
My pleasure. And thank you so much for your openness and your willingness to use yourself. I have a quote here that I would love to share to drive this home too. So this comes from Dr. Robert Holden, because I know that you're like, hey, something else for me to work on, something else for me to grow on. Here's the quote. There's no amount of self-improvement that ever makes up for a lack of self-acceptance. This is the fallacy of most high achievers. This belief of, I just need to improve in these ways, and then suddenly I'll feel like I'm enough, and then I can accept myself. If you think you're not enough now, you never will be.
Jeez.
So it's a choice right now to change your relationship with yourself.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Knowledge. Thank you. This is amazing. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for helping with that. Like I said, I have some notes and really moving forward with that. Going back to cultures of the organization, because we talked about, different things with the leaders, but then you have the employees. So you have the leaders and then you have the employees, and sometimes the leaders, they can be, changing something or making the culture better and working on something. But that employee, two people hearing the same thing, and one person say, oh, this is awesome. This is great. This is really going to help us. They have our best interests at heart. Then somebody else going to say, oh, man, they trying to tell me what to do, and they all in my business. Thriving this, company culture, from the leadership standpoint, but let's talk about it from both sides. What do it looks like from both sides? Let's talk about the employee. What are their responsibility?
I think the employees always have a key role in this always. And like I mentioned before, when I was kind of talking about my geeky definition of culture, a leader cannot directly change what an employee believes. A leader can simply work to create experiences that might reinforce a set of beliefs that drive the behavior that you're looking for. So as far as the employee, they are contributing to whatever the culture is. So an employee and their leader, like that relationship, both of them are co-creating the relationship that exists. And this is a key thing in organizations to remember. If you can get everybody to think in terms of co-creation and contribution, then people stop blaming so much, because blame is toxic in organizations. Like, we all know, I think intellectually, that it's not all that effective to blame. I think we kind of know, like, well, this is probably not going to work very well. And yet almost all of us still do it, at least from time to time.
Yeah.
Some of you maybe just do it in your head, and then you pretend like you're not blaming when you speak out loud. But the employee absolutely has a responsibility to pay attention to what is their contribution. And I look at it as not just a sense of responsibility, but actually empowerment. Because if you as an employee feel like you're constantly at the whim of what leaders are doing in an organization, you're going to probably feel incredibly stressed out. You're going to feel disempowered. You're going to feel frustrated. You're going to feel probably unfulfilled. You might feel stuck. Like, all these awful things, it's probably going to manifest as illness in your body. Like, it's not going to be a good place. So always looking at the lens of whether things are going well or things are a little bit tough. Through my action or my inaction, how am I contributing to this being exactly what it is? Challenge yourself to come up with at least 3 things that's either your action or your inaction. It might be something that you're not doing, something that you're not saying, that is allowing something to continue exactly the way that it is, or has contributed to it being that way. So think about contribution. When the employee is able to show up through that lens of thinking contribution and co-creation, they actually immediately feel more empowered, as long as they're not judging themselves. So self-acceptance matters here. If you judge yourself, then maybe you're just going to like curl up in a ball on the floor and feel like, I contributed to this. It's all my fault. And that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for, I didn't realize that before, but I could do something different. And I don't control everything, but maybe I can have an impact by changing how I'm showing up.
Dr. Lori, I'm telling you, it's so much you're talking, and I'm like, this podcast,
very excited.
Now, this podcast can easily turn into a 3-4 hour podcast. I mean, you're just unpacking so much. And it's so much I want to just dig into. But I definitely have to get into your book. You have an amazing book. Yeah. Hey, listen, go purchase it. Learn what you can learn, because you're not going to get everything in this podcast setting. So go ahead and get the book. But I want to talk about the book. What inspired you to write this book, and why?
So let's see, this book came out in 2021. So it's been, coming up on, I think, 4 years. And, the work that we did at NASA was very powerful for me, because I already really believed in the career field that I chose for myself, organizational psychology, but to see that something like psychological safety had life and death consequences for NASA was just very sobering. And it gave me an even stronger sense of purpose with doing this kind of work. And it took us a while. I mean, the Columbia accident happened in 2003. My career with NASA spanned from 2006 to 2014. And so it still took us a few years. And I say us because I co-wrote this book with my business partner, Dr. Philip Mead. And part of the reason is because it took many of those years for us to take we talk about it as like a complex adaptive system. Organizations are complex adaptive systems. And that's a lot for people to try to digest. The leaders that we're working with are not experts in human behavior, and they're not usually experts in complex problem solving either. Like, my business partner is an engineer. And so we took a lot of time to say, how do we take these very complex ideas and create a model that's simple enough that leaders can use this, they can implement this in their organizations, and they can make sense of it without feeling like we were losing the accuracy. So my business partner is really into complex problem solving. I actually love to simplify things whenever possible. And so it was our brainchild together to finally come around to writing this book, because all of our work with our clients since I started this company 12 years ago, is so much of what we work on with them. It's the same things we were working on with NASA. It still comes down to human behavior. It still comes down to, is your culture helping you actually get the results you want to get? And we really wanted to get these ideas out to as many leaders as possible, because our high level purpose as a company is we exist to evolve humanity. And that sounds so lofty, but we believe in it wholeheartedly. And so the book is meant to be our effort And I think that we do a pretty good job of simplifying something that is not simple so that leaders can take meaningful and informed action.
What are some of the things or drawbacks you see that typically happen with some leaders?
I think the biggest drawback is usually around self-deception. So, it was present at NASA, and it's not related to intelligence. And this is what's so key for people to understand. We're not usually talking about a lack of intelligence in organizations. Usually you've got very smart people. And most of those people usually really want to do good work, but there's a level of self-deception that leads them to keep getting in their own way. And so that's where we do so much of our own core work to start with, is helping each leader become that much more self-aware, just like you so courageously did a few minutes ago, like letting yourself introspect. What is the story in my head? Because stuff comes up between people all the time, but most of it's manufactured. It's based on our assumptions, it's based on the story that we tell ourselves. And so my personal why, I think, is to inspire introspection. My goal is to inspire not just leaders, but really all people to reflect on what's my part here. Because that, when you stop beating yourself up, is just incredibly empowering.
Wow. So when you're talking about leaders, let's say individually, somebody listening to the Lead to Greatness podcast, individuals say, man, you know what? I want to do better. I want to do better. Maybe not from the company standpoint, but I want to have a better team. I want my team to come together, collaborate. I want to create a communication and build this trust between us. What do you think next?
Yeah, I think the survey is a great starting point. And, Cedric, what you'll see over the next couple of weeks is you're going to get several coaching emails from me as a follow-on.
Okay.
It's going to give you some things that you can think about, like, how can I implement this and move this forward? But I think that for leaders who are really wanting to approach their teams and improve some of the communication, I really do want you to lean in with some vulnerability. Dr. Brene Brown, she's one of my personal heroes. I love the work that she does. And I think that she's a very entertaining storyteller. She did like a couple different TED Talks that went viral. One was back in 2010. Another one was in 2012. Yeah. So she speaks really articulately about this. And so when leaders can lead with even a little bit of vulnerability, that will start to set the tone. And it could be something as small as, hey, y'all, I was listening to Lead with Greatness, and there was this conversation happening about psychological safety, and it was something I hadn't thought about before. And I want us to be able to talk about that, and I want us to work to create a lot of psychological safety as a team. And, you can work to define it or whatever, but like even starting that conversation, you can get people to begin speaking about what makes it easier for you to be vulnerable in a team setting. And you can define it with those simple examples, like admitting if you don't understand something, admitting if you've made a mistake, a willingness to express disagreement, a willingness to give feedback, a willingness to receive feedback. These are all examples of vulnerability. And have them identify like what behaviors make it easier for you to feel that, psychological safety. Now you've got this behavior list that you can work from, and a leader can self-assess against it. And I don't want you to assess, are you good at it or bad at it? Because that's going to trigger defensiveness in your brain.
Gotcha.
But I want you to ask yourself, how consistently do you demonstrate this behavior? All leaders are going to do some of those behaviors some of the time, but there's probably some that you do very consistently. And there's probably some that just you've never really thought about. So you maybe occasionally do it, but it's not top of mind for you. That would be like early starting phase. And then there's plenty more to go from there to start opening up even more communication with the team. But just find out from them, like what makes it easier for them to be open. Blame is a big no-no. I know I mentioned that once before. It's the most common defense mechanism that we see in organizations. Leading with blame in any kind of conversation, something that's meant to be problem solving, that's going to hurt psychological safety for sure. I would say something else to avoid is interrupting, especially if it's happening kind of unconsciously, talking over. I will say, like, I interrupt people all the time as a coach, as a facilitator. I do it all the time, and I let them know ahead of time, I will be interrupting you. But when I do it, I say, I want to jump in and interrupt you right now because I don't understand something you said and I'm going to have a hard time getting clear about. Or I'll say, I'm interrupting you because I can feel you going down this path of feeling like a victim, and I don't want you to sit in that disempowered space.
Gotcha.
Let's shift the language. So I'm not saying never interrupt. I don't want to be dogmatic about it, but if you're interrupting or talking over somebody, they're likely going to feel like they don't matter to you. Yeah. And they're going to learn to just keep their thoughts and feelings to themselves.
That's good. As far as going back to the book, is this something inside the book that you want to share with the Lead to Greatness community? Maybe something you want to share, maybe something you say, you know what, I definitely, in the book, I talked about this right here. I think this would be helpful in this regard of what we're talking about. What would that be?
Yeah, there's a story that I share in the book, actually, that ties back into the self-acceptance piece that we were talking about earlier. Mm-hmm. And the main objective of the story in the book that I'll share with you is to help high achievers realize that you will actually grow faster when you do so from a self-accepting lens versus a self-judging lens. So in the book, I share this story about two kids, and one of them named Joey, they're at the batting cages. So a pitch comes and Joey swings and he misses, and he's got lower self-acceptance. And so his reaction in the moment to missing the pitch is like his face starts to get red. He gets all worked up. You can see like he starts to kind of like white knuckle around the bat. He's like so frustrated. And the coach is trying to give him feedback. The coach is trying to help him, tell him how he can do better. Joey can't even hear it. Like he is so consumed with beating himself up, right? Like little tantrum. We kind of picture this child having a tantrum. In fact, another pitch comes because that's life. Life's going to keep throwing you pitches. He's still having a tantrum. He's not even ready to swing again. Never mind actually learning from the coach what to do differently. And then contrast that with this other child named Jamal, who has higher self-acceptance. So he swings at a pitch, he misses, but he's got higher self-acceptance. And so he is not having a tantrum. He's not beating himself up for the fact that he missed. His coach says, hey, buddy, no problem. You know what? Just choke up on the bat a little bit and watch the ball. Don't be afraid to turn your head and actually watch it make contact. Jamal says, okay, chokes up, nails it. Yeah. Right. So like this story is in the book, and we work to tell as many stories like this as we can to simplify it and help you see that, wow, when I am self-judging, feeling not enough, I'm actually slowing down my own growth. When I can be self-accepting, when I can forgive myself quickly, when I can recover quickly from a mistake, I'm actually going to grow so much faster. And by the way, I'm going to enjoy the journey a lot more too.
Knowledge. Listen, Dr. Laura, I just purchased the book on Audible. So listen, Lead to Greatness, it's on Audible, about a 7-hour, 33-minute read. I mean, listen, we can go through this, but I definitely have to get the book. Something on your heart you want to share with us as we depart. Go ahead and do so at this time.
Yeah, I want to leave your listeners with one last practical, tangible thing that they can do if they want to start to grow their self-acceptance, which is a practice of taking credit. So imagine yourself hiking up a hill or a mountain, and you can always stay focused on the summit and look at that gap, but sometimes actually pause, turn around, and let yourself feel good about the progress that you've made. So you can start a daily practice of taking credit. You don't have to just focus on the gap. You can focus on the gain. Let yourself feel good about the progress that you're making, and nothing is too small to take credit for.
Knowledge. I'm putting this into practice today. I awesome. Love it. I love it. So thank you so much. I mean, I'm telling you, you really helped me, and I know the Lead to Greatness community is definitely going to be better because of that. If someone wants to connect with you and what you're doing, where should they go?
So apart from the quiz, which if you do that, we'll have email, and you can always reply to me. I will get it, and I'm a real human. I will respond to you. Or you can find me on LinkedIn. I love to post on there things about leadership, whatever coming up for me and my work with my clients. If you want to connect, just tell me that you heard me here on Lead with Greatness, and I'll be happy to connect with you, answer any questions that have come up.
We want to thank you for joining us today on the Lead to Greatness podcast. So remember, if you help others reach their greatest potential, together we can change the world. Peace.